Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the Realm of History. Tonight we got live review for chapter 27 about imperialism, right? Five section chapters. So, it's a lot to study, a lot to prepare for. Live agenda tonight, as we're getting to it, make sure that you let me know that you're here in the comments, of course. We'll do some key advice. We'll do some selected key terms and figures. I will have some AP info for you talking about the format of it and some tips on the MCQs. And then we'll go into question and answer time. So let's get into our key advice for tonight. I think it's really still important to write things down from this lesson. I know that not everybody learns that way. That's the way that I kind of learn, is writing things down and then reading them. But I think it's still very helpful to make sure you have a record of what's important to know. Of course, I think tonight and tomorrow, reading through your notes several times through sections 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, remembering that section 2 was a printed notes, right? I think that it's also important to use the review sheet to quiz yourself a little bit. That review sheet is going to tell you kind of what you really need to know, especially today and tomorrow on the AP portion. I would also say that we need to really think about praying for the right things. There's a lot of people that need our prayers right now, a lot of situations in the world that need our prayers. I just think, instead of praying for success on this quiz, which is really minuscule in the grand scheme of things, we want to pray for our health, pray for our safety, pray for the health and safety of those that need our prayers. Think about those that don't have all of the great things and privileges that we have. And of course, I think it's always good to express your gratitude to the good Lord for all the blessings that have been bestowed upon you. And I think asking to use your talents to the fullest is always valid and beneficial. Number 3, you want to make sure that you be here now, right? You want to focus on the task at hand. So when you come in tomorrow to the realm, pop in world history and pop in AMSCO and make sure that you're ready to go. Next, I would say that you want to say thank you to your parents. I think that's important. They do a lot for you. As a parent myself, parents make big sacrifices for their children. And so make sure that you take some time, tell your parents that you love them, and give them and express gratitude to them. Finally, I think it's important to meet the challenge. I am going to try to challenge you tomorrow, most likely with the AP portion. So I'm hoping that that will give you a good challenge and something to work toward. All right, let's get right into the key terms, the key figures, some of the key places, starting off with a group of people called the Boers, right? The Boers were Dutch settlers, and they're usually farmers. They took over lands in South Africa to create cash crop plantations. We also said in the notes and in AMSCO that they were known as the Afrikaneers, right? Eventually, they came into conflict with the British, and this escalated into something known as the Boer War. The Boer War was war between actually the British and the Boers, which were the Dutch, over land control in South Africa. It did end with the British kind of taking over that territory. The Boers were allowed to stay and farm under a new union that the British put together. Next, we're going to go into a famous meeting called the Berlin Conference, right? The Berlin Conference was a meeting of 14 European countries to decide upon rules for taking over lands in Africa. The interesting thing is that no African people or African countries were invited to provide their opinion on these matters at the Berlin Conference. So this is basically imperialism 101, social Darwinism, where Europeans think they have the right to take over this territory. Since I said it, let's talk about the definition of social Darwinism. Social Darwinism is the application of survival of the fittest to humans, right? It was used by Europeans as a racial factor in imperialistic conquests over non-Europeans. Part of that process is a term called paternalism. Paternalism was basically providing for colonized people, like military support, food, some building, some creation of transportation systems, but not granting them rights. This was something that was done by Britain in both Africa and Asia. Next is a war called the Crimean War. This is the Russians versus the Ottomans, with support from Britain and France going on the Ottoman side. Russia was seeking a warm water port in the Black Sea on the Crimean Peninsula. Russia lost the war entirely. They did gain some land in Crimean Peninsula, but not really all the land that they were hoping to gain. Major geographic development was the formation of the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal was a human-made waterway that connected the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. Okay, it was done in joint by the French and the Egyptians. Eventually, after it was built, the British took over the running of the Suez Canal. Next is a term called Raj. Very simple. It's just the term used to refer to the British control of India. Kind of went from like 1850 to 1950, somewhere in that 100-year range. Not important to know the exact dates, but mid 1800s, mid 1900s, that's what you're looking for there. Next is the term sepoy. A sepoy was an Indian soldier that served and fought in the British Army. Next is a term called assimilation. This is basically the adoption of cultural practices. Now, assimilation can be forced, it can be chosen, or it can be encouraged, all of which happened in the imperialistic expansion by Europeans into Africa, into India, and then also in Southeast Asia. All right, next we're going to go into some key figures now. The first key figure that I want to talk about is, of course, Menelik II. Menelik II was an Ethiopian emperor, fought off an invasion from Italy to keep Ethiopia independent. Next is an individual that we talked about in section 5 from the Philippines. That is Emilio Aguinaldo. He's a Philippine ruler. He resisted American control in the Philippines. I want to talk briefly about Queen Liliuokalani. She was the queen of Hawaii that was actually replaced by sugarcane producers and the Dole Pineapple Company kind of taking over under the control of Sanford Dole. The final key figure that I want to take a look at today, Shaka Zulu. Shaka Zulu was a leader or chief of the Zulu nation that fought against the British, fought pretty hard, and really did a great job. Eventually, British weaponry kind of overwhelmed the Zulu tribe. All right. Today, we are going to have some AP advice. Okay, so we're going to do AP advice next. And let me get into that. I will talk about a couple of key things here. The AP advice that I want to take a look at is going to be as follows. So on the AP portion, all right, you're going to have MCQs. There's 3 prompts of MCQs, and there's 8 total MCQ questions. Then there's another 7 questions that are comprehension style short answer questions that I wrote from the AMSCO book. Now, I put a lot of information on your review sheet. I titled it AP Information. What I really think would be beneficial in studying for that part is in the AMSCO topics, focusing on the bolded words, terms, and figures. That's where I'm going to be drawing the vast inspiration for most of the questions that I wrote. Okay. Now, on to some of the AP advice for the MCQs. The first prompt is going to be about the province of Bengal, which in India was split into a partition of Muslim side and Hindu side. So the prompt is going to talk to you about how that went down and how the people reacted. That was one of the factors that led to Indian nationalist movement and wanting to drive the British out. The second prompt is going to be about the Crimean War. Remember, that's Russia versus the Ottomans. And then the third prompt is going to be about imperialism in Africa, especially in the places of Gambia and Kenya, which were talked about in AMSCO, but we didn't talk about those in our lesson. So those are some of the more specific imperialistic situations in Africa. All right, so that's what I want to say about the AP today. As I said in class, I'm not going to talk much further about the AP advice or AP topics tonight, but I will answer your questions about anything else. Before we get into the question and answer session, I do have a special commercial break that you might want to check out. Just give me a second to let that break and commercial go into play. Here you go. Hey there, Realm family. As you know, I'm not the most special person in the world, but I do care a lot about my students. One of my students has started a business clothing line, and I am here supporting the cause. Check out this high quality, super soft, and well-fitting hoodie from AR Apparel, my newest sponsor. They're currently running a special Easter line with faith-based messages. Check out AR Apparel on Instagram for more information. I love the sweet pink tags. They're so Lizzie. Hey, this here message is Realm Family approved, and more importantly, your favorite guest speaker, Trapper John, approves this sponsorship. All right, so there you have it. I love to support my students, and especially when they're making business ventures. If there's anything I can do to convince you to purchase one of these really nice apparel items, please let me know how I can help. And at the end today, we got question and answer session. So I'm going to go to the comments now. Hopefully you've checked in with me, and we will take a look at some of those key questions for tomorrow's quiz. All right, here we go. Yeah, so Pearson, you want to study page 780 in the textbook for that. Talks about, okay, a colony, a protectorate, a sphere of influence, and economic imperialism. Those are some of the major forms of control. Russia didn't have any big allies. The biggest ally that was involved in that Crimean War was the British helping out the Ottomans. That was the big one. So that code is a special one to me. That was given to me by my stepfather. When he passed away, I inherited that. That's actually a fox. That's a fox fur coat. Let's see. Do we know specific examples? Yeah. So in the chart on page 780, it gives you a definition of the type of imperialism, and then it gives you an example. So what's on that chart and then what's in AMSCO would really be helpful. So this question is talking about the word incursions, not just Koreans. Incursions means the Japanese were entering into Korea, which is an area that, all right, you have. So what you have is you have China and Japan vying for a long time. China controlled Korea for a very long time. And then what ended up happening is Japanese people start moving in. That's called an incursion. You can find out what a protectorate is, page 780. That would be exactly what you need to know on page 780. So the jewel in the crown, this is basically that it's a British term. Like, the British, they had a monarchy for a long time, right? So you wear a crown and it has jewels in it. And what it's saying is that India was the most important, India was the most important colony for the British. And that's why they called it the jewel in the crown. Content part is going to be 20 questions. It's all multiple choice and matching. Fifth hour girls won. Yep, fifth hour girls won easy. They aced it. They got 10 out of 10. It's the first time this year that any class has aced the review game. They did not cheat. And I don't think I was watching closely. It didn't seem like any boys gave him any answers. So that's a legit win, a legit win. It's kind of, it was actually really, really fun in the class because they haven't won yet. And for them to win, it was kind of cool. I was really happy for them. Good job, fifth hour. Any other questions tonight, ladies and gentlemen, Realm family? All right, so I don't really want to get into this because it was in the AP information. Guano is kind of nasty. It's bat excrement. So it's bat poop that gets like the bats and birds, they basically like do their droppings on rocks in the sea. And so it's basically bat and also sea bird waste that can be used as fertilizer for crop production, actually. Yeah, that's what guano is. Hey, this is one of my former students. Hey, Luke, what's up, big guy? Thank you and appreciate you. Hope all is well for you and the family. Tell Lacey, mom, and dad that I said hello. All right. Yeah, sixth hour did get disqualified. So sorry about that, guys. Got that DQ. I used to have, when I had hair, I used to have a high fade. I always went with a high fade. Yeah. So throughout the chapter, there were maps. We talked about in Africa, what areas were controlled by European countries, in India, what areas were controlled, and in Southeast Asia. That was something that we definitely focused on in the lessons and in the reading. Yes. Awesome. Glad to hear that, Master Luke. Appreciate that. Nobody cheated. Nobody cheated. Nobody cheated. Jaden, you had a question. I didn't see it, buddy. Where are you at, Jaden? Oh, because your question is not a real question. It's about extra credit. There's no extra credit unless you won the game. What should we know of the Great Game War? Only anything that's in the reading. That's all. Not too much. I don't think that's going to be on there. Yeah, Siam or Thailand, King Mongkut modernized the economy, and they kind of were a buffer zone between French colonies of Vietnam and British colony of Malaysia. Yep, that is true. Hope that you guys were able to hear the commercial. My daughter really is into videography, so I try to get her to help me out, trying to help out AR Apparel. I think that their stuff is great. I'm not lying to you. It really is like the softest hoodie I've ever tried on. So it was good. Uh, all maps in the all maps in the sections of world history patterns of interaction would be beneficial. Why was Ethiopia not made into a colony? Well, remember, they stayed independent for a really long time. Uh, they were able to kind of play diplomacy with France, Russia, and Italy, and were really kind of able to keep their independence for a great deal of time. Certainly your choice. I think you should go with AR Apparel. If you're not going to buy Realm apparel, that's fine. I would really love you guys to have something to remember the class by. But if you're going to buy anything, support Lizzie and AR Apparel. I think that would be the best way to go about it. That's your classmate, your colleague, local business. I think you should support that. Images and charts in AMSCO always, they always could really help out. So I would say definitely study them. I'm not going to tell you not to study them. Of course, yeah. Almost every section we had a little bit of a talk about the notes saying, what was the effects or what were the effects of colonial rule in Africa? What were the effects of colonial rule in India? So on and so forth. Well, really, he was holding back several groups like the Dutch, the British, the French, and the Germans. But it was more about the fact that their economy was already in place and they were able to compete with the European imperialists. So that really kind of helped keep them in control. Sino-Japanese War, that's Japan versus China. So if Ivo Lango's asking that question, that's got to be one of my current students. Investigation is on. All right, good question. So on the review sheet, it says, all right, know each topic's essential question. So at the start in AMSCO of every topic, like 6.1, for example, it'll start with what's called an essential question. I think those questions are really important. I don't think you need to write them all out, but I do think that it would be good to study those questions and have an understanding of what the answers would be. Okay. All right, got time for a few more questions and then I need to call it a night. Sepoy Mutiny, very simple. This is, remember I had section 4, which we did online on Teams. We had the different ideology of how the sepoys were either Hindu or Muslim, which meant that they were forbidden to eat pork or beef. And the cartridges that the British were making were sealed with beef and pork fat, which hardens and forms like a wax. So they would form that wax and they would put that in the cartridge. And so they had to bite those cartridges open, which meant that they refused to do that. And the British started throwing them in jail. So they led a revolt against the British, those Indian soldiers. Siam was talked about in section 5 about Southeast Asia. Of course. I love your stuff. So I like to support my students in any way that I can. Good job, Lizzie. All right. Well, if there aren't any further questions, I want to say thank you for joining up tonight. Not too many of you came, so hopefully it will help keep you focused on the task at hand. And we'll see you tomorrow for the quiz. Have a great night. God bless all of you. And we'll see you for the quiz tomorrow.